The Blackmagic Ultimatte 12 4K is what we use literally every day with no post cleanup to do all of our chroma keying. And in the process of doing that, I told the team, wouldn't it be cool if we could have two people looking like they're in the same room? And I've seen some videos showing that, but I wanted to take it a step further and not only have just like a wide shot of the two of us, but also over the shoulder shots, both directions, and a moving slider shot. So in this video, I'm going to break down each step that we did to get there, and it's so cool. I can't wait to show this to you. So this whole thing starts with camera placement. There are 8 cameras involved, and I need to show you exactly which one's where. And so I've got this graphic. Everything that's in green is in Australia. Everything that's red is in the United States. So let's start in the upper left. You'll see that over the shoulder shot is shot here at the studio, and it's over my shoulder. I'm the one in the interview. So as I'm interviewing Ryan, this over the shoulder focuses as if Ryan was where he was in the space of our studio, but he's not really there, but we're focusing there at around an f2. So we've got a nice soft over the shoulder, blurry bokeh shoulder edge. The next 2 shots are Ryan's close up and then also an Exebo. Exebo is a slider that we're using. It communicates directly with Unreal Engine. That worked out well because this is an Unreal set. That's in Australia, sliding around, moving back and forth. Next up at the bottom are wide shots, and you'll see a wide for both locations because obviously we both have a wide shot. Now in this graphic, I put them side by side, but just know they're literally exactly on top of each other. They're at millimeter, exactly the same height, the same angle, everything, the same focal length, the same f-stop, everything's exactly the same so that every piece of this looks perfectly the same. Next up, you'll see 2 more shots, an Exebo now in the United States, moving back and forth, and the close-up for my close-up. And then lastly, we're going to see Ryan's over-the-shoulder shot. And in this shot, of course, the same thing just in reverse. And over the shoulder, focused as if I was there so that the focus plane looks correct and visually perspective is the same. So now we have the rug and the couch. That's what I'm sitting on in the United States. And then we have the coffee table and the chair. That's what Ryan is sitting on in Australia. And by putting those together in that sequence, it looks like my feet are behind the coffee table because it's in front. And it looks like that coffee table is just sitting right on top of that rug. It's an awesome way to stack the illusion. So Ryan and I communicated over Zoom, but we could have used FaceTime or even just a phone call. We picked Zoom just because the studio already had a nice tech infrastructure in place to allow that to be a way to backhaul the audio. But for 4K video, because we wanted this to all be done in 4K, that required a different solution. And here's Morgan to explain exactly how we handled that.
So why would you not use like Zoom or something like that for this? That's because Zoom is going to prioritize the audio over the video. This is great because that's going to give you the lowest latency possible on your audio, which will enable you to have a real-time conversation with somebody. This is all going to come at a cost though, because it's going to degrade your video quality in order to maintain that audio latency. And since we're keying the green screen remotely, having that image degrade is not going to work for us. Also, at the time of this video, we're not able to have a full 4K signal come from Zoom. At most, you're going to get 1080p. And that just wasn't going to work for us because we're a 4K studio here. Everything in our signal chain is full 4K. The solution that we ended up switching to was SRT encoding. Now, SRT encoding allowed us to do a 4K H.265 stream. It also has built-in packet loss recovery and a controllable latency latency that we could set ourselves. The packet loss recovery is super important here. Because we're traveling over 9,000 miles across the public internet, we're gonna lose some packets along the way. So it's very important that we have a way to recover from that. And for us, that ended up being SRT being the solution. You may have watched the news and you may have seen when the people in the studio toss to a reporter out in the field, there's this awkward pause, that delay. For us, we didn't want that to be the case here in our studio. And because we're setting the latency to be 2 seconds, so we know that we're getting the remote feed at that 2-second delay, That meant that we needed to delay our studio cameras by the same amount of time. So how did we confirm that our cameras were matching the remote feed's delay? We ended up using a really cool website called Synchor.live. Synchor.live allowed us to pull up a website on our laptop, and by pointing our cameras at it, we can take a photo with both of them on screen and see that our clocks line up, confirming that we're at the 2-second delay on our cameras here in the studio to match that remote feed delay. Once that was set up, it was as simple as delaying our audio. For us, we're using the Waves eMotion LV1 mixer, and it has a delay plugin that we're able to insert on any of our audio channels or any of our audio outputs. Again, this will vary from audio console to audio console, but most of them have a way to do a delay for your either on an input level or on an output level. I'm going to hand this back over to Andre, and he's going to walk you through some of the wiring diagrams of what it took to get all these Ultimates connected together.
Thanks, Morgan. So let's start with a wide shot, and I'm going to show you exactly how we wired this up. So on the wide shot in the United States, we're running it through that delay mechanism and then sending it into the foreground of the Blackmagic Ultimatte 12 4K. And then in Australia, we're sending that over SRT into the studio, and that's coming into the foreground of, we'll just call it Ultimatte 2. That Ultimatte then is sending out the matte and the fill into the layer matte and the layer of Ultimatte 1. By doing that, we then combine those together and send them on program out. And doing it this way allows us to have 2 Ultimates, one for each green screen environment. So we're optimizing and getting the best key possible. So in this first over-the-shoulder shot, I want to show you where I'm out of focus and it's focused in on Ryan, how we set up the cameras on this. And we wired this a little differently to take advantage of the Blackmagic Constellation 8K and how we can send and merge and kind of composite inside of the Constellation versus the Ultimatte. This was really just because we already had wiring in place for this, but it's cool to show the options between the Ultimatte and the ATEM. As we look at this graphic, we can see the Australia camera is being fed into the foreground of this first Ultimatte in this diagram. And then that's being keyed and sent out to the program output of the Ultimatte. And that's being fed in as camera 1, because that's like the background main image that's in place. And now we got a layer on top of that, my out of focus shoulder and head. And the way we did that is we have the camera, we run it through that delay mechanism, and then we send it into the foreground element of the Blackmagic Ultimatte 12. This is a separate one from the other one. And then we key it out, get the key correct, and then we send that over matte and fill, and that comes into the ATEM key and fill. And then we merge those together with a Luma upstream key. Next up is over the shoulder 2. And in this case, it's a lot like the other one, just reversed, right? So now I'm in focus, Ryan's shoulder is out of focus. So how do we do this? Well, we took the camera in the United States and ran that through the delay mechanism into that first Ultimatte. And then we're just keying it like we would just key a normal shot with the foreground and the background. And we're sending that out over into the ATEM. Then on the Australia side, we're receiving that Australia camera, we're pushing that into a different Ultimatte, and now as we do the key, we're sending that out over matte and fill, and that's coming into the ATEM on ATEM in key and fill. Because we're using the ATEM Constellation 8K, we have 4 MEs. So we're using ME4 in this case to composite these together using an upstream Luma key. So now let's take a look at those Exebo slider shots. We'll start with what we're calling Exebo 2. That's the one in the United States. And so that camera is running through that delay mechanism, and then it's into the Blackmagic Ultimatte, and I'm just running that through, compositing the foreground and the background, putting those two together and shooting that out. So now we're at the other slider shot in Australia, and the wiring looks exactly the same. So how are we able to pull that off? Well, the reason we were able to do it that way is because we have an Unreal machine in Australia, and it's wild. It's connected to our Unreal server network. And so as we adjust the lighting or anything else in real time, we saw those changes on this slider shot. Isn't that so cool? So that slider is being composited on the Australia side, because I'm never in that shot, he can just send over the final composited image to us. So there's the wiring schematics for each of those different shots. But I bet you may want to know a little bit more about how we got Unreal Engine to be synchronized all the way across the planet. Morgan, why don't you show us a little bit about the details of how we did that?
So now I want to kind of cover what we were using Unreal Engine for in this production. I'm not going to get into all the details here because we could spend hours and hours talking about Unreal Engine, but I wanted to hit kind of the key points that we were using in this particular remote production. Here at the studio, I have computers dedicated to each camera. As a result, I need a way to control Unreal Engine across multiple computers. For this, I'm using Switchboard. Switchboard is provided by the Unreal Engine developers, and this allows you to launch Unreal Engine across multiple machines without having to go into each one individually. Additionally, I'm using something called multi-user server to synchronize any changes that we make within the levels. So if we move a plant or change out the texture on something, or we add in a painting or anything like that, it synchronizes across all the environments. Ryan has a remote robotics slider called a Gazebo. That is sending positional data to Unreal Engine to move the virtual camera. He could have sent me that data across the internet, and we could have tried to align the backgrounds with the tracking data and all that. But it ended up just being simpler to have Ryan key that shot in its entirety and just send me the final composited feed. This meant that Ryan needed a copy of the Unreal Engine project so that he could run it locally on his computer. So this meant I needed to make sure all the textures, all the 3D models, anything we were going to use in that project needed to all be bundled up and emailed or file transferred to him so that he could open it up on his computer. Once he had a copy of the project, he simply connected to our multi-user session through a VPN connection. Again, you can use a VPN, or you could open up the ports. Refer to the Unreal documentation around multi-user server if you're needing more information regarding that. But once he joined our multi-user session, we were able to just synchronize our changes and work together on the set collaboratively. And it was a really cool process to see his machine connected with all of our machines here and just doing all that cool updating in real time. That's kind of the basics of what we did here with Unreal Engine.
Thanks, Morgan. I wanted to show you the back of the Ultimates, and I wanted to show you very specifically how we're actually wiring this up. Here you can see Ryan. I've got him outlined in white, and I want to show you these two Ultimates that are both in the United States, but I'm just showing the bottom one is in Australia, showing that's the Australia feed. So in our studio here, how am I wiring these up just so you can see directly what we're doing? We're taking the fill from that bottom Ultimatte and we're sending it up to the layer in on the top Ultimatte. And similarly, we're taking the matte output of that bottom Ultimatte and we're sending it to the layer matte input of the top Ultimatte. So this is literally exactly where you're going to wire these up. Okay, so now that we have that Ultimatte wired up, there's some software settings that we have to do on the Ultimatte to put it all together. And this is how we make the layer on top. You're going to start by choosing Matte In at the top of the menu selection. Next, in the middle, in the groups area, you're going to choose Layer Matte. And then there's three buttons you're going to turn on: the LY Input, the LM Invert, and the LY In Linear. You want to make sure each of these settings are turned on. Okay, now that you've done that, there's two more things that you need to do. You're going to press Matte In at the top again. That kind of resets the menu for us to start over. And once you've done that, you're going to see in the functions area these two buttons. I want you to select LY in FGBG. This puts the layer matte composite on top of the foreground. If you want to have the ATEM do the heavy lifting of merging these two together, here's how you do that. You start by choosing Settings, and then under Settings, you're going to choose in the Groups area, Outputs. Below in the Functions area, you'll then choose Matte Out Invert. Those are the settings on the Ultimatte side. And then over in the ATEM, in our case, the ATEM Constellation 8K, we're going to go over to that ME in our upstream key that we've set up, and we're going to make sure pre-multiplied key is selected. So one of the little tricks that I use, and I use this from time to time when especially on a wide shot where there's a large variance in lighting and I want to make sure I have the best key possible, you can do something called a screen capture. I end up calling it a clean plate, but that's probably just my own made up words and not really the right thing to say there. But the way that works is we go into Matte and we choose screen capture. And when we do, it's essentially taking a picture of the green background. So in order to pull this off, you first must strike the set of anything that's on the set. So in this case, doing this for the wide shot in Australia meant that I needed to remove the coffee table and the chair. So I asked them to do that, and then I went in and chose screen capture. And then from there, we took that picture, I said yes, and then you do screen correct. And when you do that, it's basically at the pixel level, taking a picture of that image, and it's realizing this is where the green screen is. And so now when we brought the coffee table back on and the chair back in, man, it looks so good. All the shadows are crisply defined. It was awesome. So what's the summary of all these steps? Well, obviously you have to have 2 studios, and the smaller studio of the 2 is the one that wins. So what that means about that is that's going to determine where the camera placement goes. If the camera is too far away and the other studio can't support that, it's not going to work. So the smaller studio sets up those locations. Now, the most important shot to get defined is the wide shot. It's the hardest to define, but all your cameras need to be at the same focal length, the same height, the same angle, every single thing about them, same f-stop, everything as close as you can get to the same to help sell the illusion that it's coming from a single camera. And, one of the things we found is if there's something that you can have to put on the floor that's exactly the same size, it's typically a square, we found that's really awesome. And so that could be as simple as telling the other studio to cut out a piece of cardboard at a certain shape, or as complex as both of you purchasing the same thing, whatever that is, to make sure you have it in the shot. But we want to lay that on the floor, and that helps us really measure out an angle where everything needs to be to get everything pixel perfect, positioned correctly. So there it is, all the pieces it takes to pull this off. I just want you to know that we love the Ultimatte. It has literally transformed my company. It's taken us to a place I never really imagined. I can't believe the quality of key that I'm getting in real time. Everything you see from SociallyU, that's straight out of camera. There's no post color grading and there's no post keying. That's just, there it is. So just know it's such a reliable and good tool. I'm using it, and I believe in many ways I'm getting a superior key than somebody's anguishing for hours and hours trying to get their key right. I can get every tiny little hair on the key. It's an amazing tool. If you haven't used the Ultimatte yet, I highly encourage you to integrate it in your workflow. It just basically unlocks the ability to put people literally anywhere. It is incredible. Thanks for taking the time to watch this.